Welcome to today's historical deep dive. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's a world where the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, and fear. A place where every sunrise is a gamble, and every sunset is a small, hard-won victory. Forget the gilded castles and noble quests. This is the story of the hands that built them, the backs that fend them, the souls that simply endured. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know to bring these quiet corners of history back into the light. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Would you be the miller, the weaver, the one who tends the pigs, or perhaps just another pair of hands in the field? Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. You don't wake from rest. You wake from cold and hunger. The straw beneath you is damp, smelling of earth, sweat, and the mice that share your hovel. It shifts uncomfortably as you stir, the rough stems scratching against your skin. Outside, the pre-dawn air bites, a harsh whisper promising another day of relentless labor. The only light comes from the dying embers of last night's fire, a frail orange eye in the darkness of the small dwelling. Your breath mists visibly before your face, little clouds that vanish as quickly as they form. You shiver, pulling the coarse wool closer, but the cold seeps through your thin tunic like water through a sieve. The damp has settled deep into your bones overnight. Beside you, your spouse coughs, a dry, rattling sound that speaks of damp walls, smoke-filled air, and the constant threat of illness clinging to the poor like a shroud. Your children huddle tighter against you, small, vulnerable forms that are both your greatest burden and your fiercest love, a dependency that weighs heavier than any harvest. You know this feeling intimately, this knot in your stomach that isn't just simple hunger, though that is always present, but a primal anxiety about the day, the week, unpredictable year ahead. Will the crops fail? Will the Lord demand more? Will sickness claim one of your own before the next snow? The village is beginning to stir around you, a chorus of muted sounds in the gray light. You hear the lowing of oxen being yoked, the bleating of sheep being led to pasture, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer starting its tireless rhythm, sounds that define your world, binding you inescapably to the soil and the endless cycle of survival. This isn't just waking, it's returning to consciousness in a world utterly alien to modern ease, where the very air is thick with the struggle for existence. You are a peasant, a serf bound to the land and the Lord, and the demands of both are absolute, immutable as the turning seasons. Your hands, calloused and scarred by a lifetime of toil, tell the story of your life before the sun has even risen, a living map of hardship endured. This moment, repeated countless times across forgotten centuries by millions who left no name behind, is the raw, unvarnished truth of medieval life, a life lived at the razor's edge of survival, where the body is a tool for labor, and the soul finds solace not in comfort, but in mere endurance. There is no soft transition from sleep to day, only the abrupt confrontation with cold, with need, and with the immediate, pressing demands of staying alive until tomorrow. Ask yourself, is this a life of simple hardship or something closer to quiet desperation? You grip the rough wooden handle, feeling the familiar ache in your shoulders as the heavy iron plowshare tears into the earth. The ground is stubborn, resisting your efforts, a constant reminder of its power over your fate. Behind you, the oxen strain against their yoke, their breath pluming in the cool air, like ghosts against the sharp morning chill. Your world is reduced to this narrow furrow, this act of turning soil. Repeated hour after grueling hour, under the indifferent sky. This isn't merely work. It's a visceral battle with nature, a desperate attempt to coax sustenance from unwilling ground. You pour every ounce of your strength into it, knowing that failure means hunger, not just for you, but for everyone who depends on your labor. This labor is the defining feature of your existence, a physical testament to your place in the world. You are the engine of this society, the base upon which everything else is built. Yet you possess nothing but your strength and your few meager tools. It's a strange irony. You feed everyone, from the Lord in his manor to the priest in his church, but you are often the hungriest. It makes you wonder about worth. Is it measured in comfort, in fine silks and soft words, or in the sheer, brutal force of your survival? The sweat that beads on your brow and drips into the very soil you work. You pray for sun, for rain, for a harvest free from blight or sudden hail, but you also cast nervous glances at crows gathered too thickly, or the way the clouds seem to gather like a witch's curse. Superstition isn't a choice, it's another tool, a desperate attempt to exert some phantom control in a world where you have none. We might marvel at their simple tools, their plows little changed for centuries, but perhaps we should reflect instead on the immense value placed on physical resilience in a world where muscle, not machinery, was the true capital, bought with aching backs and empty bellies. The land demands its blood price, and you pay it daily, in bone and sinew, just to live. Ask yourself, in a life defined by such relentless physical servitude, where is the line between merely surviving and truly living? And what did it cost their souls to blur it every single dawn? The gray light is barely breaking through the crack under the door, but your belly is already a hollow drum. Last night's fire has left only embers, a faint warmth clinging to the hearthstones. The bowl sits by the ashes, same as yesterday, same as the day before. It holds pottage, thick and heavy, made from peas boiled down to mush, or maybe beans, perhaps the coarse grain that survived the weevils. You dip a wooden spoon in, the steam rising, carrying no enticing aroma, just the blunt smell of cooked starch. This is breakfast. There is no ceremony, no chatter, just the quiet scrape of the spoon against the bowl. The functional motion of lifting food to mouth. It is warm, a small comfort against the perpetual chill, and it is filling in the heavy, indigestible way that only gruel can be. Variety is not a concept here, it is a forgotten dream. Sometimes, if you are fortunate, there might be a shard of dark bread, brittle as old wood, requiring effort to soften and chew. Meat, a rumor heard on market days, or the memory of a festival long past. Eggs are less rare, perhaps twice a moon if the hen is willing and the fox is not. This pottage, this relentless repetition, is not a meal enjoyed. It is a transaction, calories for labor, fuel for the aching muscles that must rise with the sun and toil until it sets. It is the stark, undeniable truth of your existence. Life is a constant, grinding quest for sustenance. Every furrow plowed, every knot tied, every whispered prayer for rain or sun is ultimately aimed at filling this hollow in your gut, at ensuring your family does not join the silent ranks beneath the earth. Luxury isn't about taste, it's about sufficiency. It's about having enough of this bland, vital paste to face the day. Consider our world, overflowing with choices, with flavors from every corner of the known earth. Do we eat for survival, for pleasure, or have we blurred the lines into something the medieval mind could never grasp? Your daily pottage, monotonous and bleak as it is, screams a truth we have forgotten. A direct, unyielding connection to the dirt, the weather, the sheer physical effort required to coax sustenance from the stubborn earth. Their lives were tethered to this primal act of feeding, a tether that bound them tighter than any feudal lord, forcing them to bend and adapt or perish. Was it resilience that powered them, or simply the animal need to fill the gut? The dusty path stretches before you, but it's not empty. Every doorway is an eye, every window a silent judgment. You step out of your hovel, and the village gaze is already upon you. There is no escape here, not in the flickering shadow of dawn or the deep gloom of dusk. Your life is an open book, read by 100 unforgiving eyes. You walk towards the communal well, your steps measured. You know they watch how you carry the bucket, how you greet the women already there. Is your dress patched too much? Is your face clean enough? They see the dark circles under your eyes. Is it from lack of sleep or something worse, something you're hiding? Your children play near the midden heap, their laughter carrying on the thin air. The gaze falls on them too. Are they healthy? Are they rambunctious? Will they grow into reliable hands or idle mouths? Every interaction is a performance, albeit an unconscious one. The transaction for eggs at the market, the muttered prayer during Mass, the argument with your neighbor over a stray chicken, all are observed, weighed, and discussed later, by firelight or in hushed tones over ale. Your identity isn't some carefully constructed self-image. It's the sum total of how your neighbors perceive you. Your reliability in the fields, your quiet piety, or lack thereof, whether you contribute to the harvest or are a burden. This is the coin of reputation. Gossip is the swift, silent carrier pigeon of this world, spreading faster than the plague itself. A careless word, a moment of weakness, a perceived slight against the priest or the Lord's man, and it can follow you for years, sticking like mud to your boots. You might believe you've confessed your sins to God, but the village remembers them. This pervasive scrutiny, this constant assessment, weaves a powerful, complex social fabric. On one hand, it fosters a fierce, necessary mutual reliance. In times of sickness or famine, your neighbors are your only lifeline. Their willingness to share, to help build a collapsed roof, to sit with you in vigil, is directly tied to the reputation you've built. Norms are enforced not by distant law, but by immediate, inescapable social pressure. To step too far out of line is to risk isolation, a slow, terrifying death in a world where survival is communal. Yet, the same gaze that offers a safety net can also be a suffocating blanket. Individuality is a luxury you cannot afford. To be different is to be suspect. A woman who talks too freely, a man who questions too much, a child who doesn't fit the expected mold, they are immediately under suspicion. Superstition thrives here, because fear has 1,000 eyes and 100 tongues. If crops fail or illness strikes, the community gaze turns inward, seeking blame. Your neighbor's sudden prosperity or your family's misfortune might be attributed to witchcraft, to envy, to a sin not confessed loudly enough. The collective fear fuels the accusations, turning suspicion into brutal reality. It's a cruel irony that the bonds needed for survival also create the cages that limit who you can be. Imagine living where anonymity is impossible, where your deepest flaws and smallest triumphs are public knowledge. It makes you reflect on our own cherished privacy, our ability to disappear into the crowd. While we value our solitude, have we lost the profound, if often harsh, sense of communal responsibility, of shared fate, that their world, for all its darkness, perhaps possessed? They knew everything about each other's struggles and sins. We know nothing of our neighbors, yet bear all to strangers on glowing screens. Was it true selfhood that was lost under the medieval gaze, or merely the illusion of hidden imperfection? You wake to the sound of the church bell. It's Sunday. The air in the small cottage is damp, clinging to your lungs. There is no question of staying home, no matter how much the ache in your back screams or the cough racks your youngest child. Sunday Mass is not optional. It is a lifeline, a non-negotiable obligation in a universe teeming with invisible threats. You pull on your roughest tunic, tie the rope around your waist, and herd the sleepy children out into the pre-dawn chill, following the path worn smooth by generations of feet heading the same way. You stand or kneel on the cold stone floor of the church. The air smells of damp plaster, beeswax candles, and the gathered breath of dozens of frightened, hopeful souls. The priest intones in Latin, a language you don't fully understand, but its meaning is conveyed through ritual, gesture, and the terrifying imagery that surrounds you. The stained glass windows, even if cracked or pieced together clumsily, are not merely decoration. They are vivid, terrifying lessons, depicting the glorious triumph of saints, but also the agonies of hell, the leering faces of demons dragging screaming souls into the abyss. The sermons, sometimes translated, speak of sin, of damnation, of the constant, watchful presence of the devil and his legions, seeking to snare your immortal soul. Your faith here, now, is not a philosophical choice debated in comfortable looms. It is a shield against overwhelming cosmic forces of evil, a desperate, urgent plea for salvation in a world where life is brutally short and suffering arrives without explanation. Every misfortune, a failed crop rotting in the field, a sick child burning with fever, a sudden storm that washes away the bridge, can be interpreted not as random chance, but as divine displeasure, punishment for some hidden sin, or worse, the direct work of dark, malevolent forces. The weight of sin isn't just a concept. It's a tangible burden you carry, a potential crack in your spiritual armor that the devil is eager to exploit. You confess your small trespasses with genuine terror, hoping it's enough to appease a potentially wrathful God and keep the unseen horrors at bay. This pervasive fear dictates more than just prayer. It shapes your interactions, your decisions, even your superstitions, blurring the lines between piety and raw, spiritual panic. Religion in this age is the deeply ingrained framework for understanding everything. It explains the inexplicable, why the plague takes one family and spares the next. It offers hope for an afterlife better than this life, a solace that makes the harshness of your existence almost bearable. It provides a rigid moral structure, enforced by the watchful eyes of neighbors and the terrifying pronouncements from the pulpit. Their palpable, ever-present fear of spiritual forces might seem alien to us now, cocooned as we are by science and secular thought. But ask yourself, is it so different fundamentally from our modern anxieties about unseen threats, economic collapse we can't control, a changing climate we barely understand, global pandemics that strike without warning? The form of the fear changes, the language we use to describe it shifts, but the fundamental human need to find meaning, to exert some semblance of control, to build a shield against the chaos of the world, persists. As enduring as the stone walls of that medieval church, the ache is back. It was a dull throb yesterday, something you tried to ignore as you bent to the soil or hefted the loom. But now it twists deep in your gut, a hot claw tearing at your insides. You try to stand, to answer the call of the rooster that crowed hours ago, but your limbs feel weighted with lead. Your head swims in a hot, dizzying fog. This is not the simple weariness of a day's labor. This is the sickness seizing hold. There is no physician here, not in this village etched into the landscape. Even if there were, his knowledge is bound by humors and star charts, the spilling of blood from veins in hope of rebalancing inner tides. And a pharmacy? The very word is alien. Your hope lies on the shelf above the hearth. Dried herbs, gathered by your spouse, or the crone down the lane, whose hands know the old ways. The remedies passed down through whispers and practice, plant by plant. You collapse back onto the straw, the rough fibers scratching against your fevered skin. Shivering one moment, sweating the next. You close your eyes, a desperate prayer forming on your lips, not for comfort, but for survival. Praying that the fever doesn't deepen its grip, that this twisting pain doesn't signal the swift descent you've seen claim neighbors, friends, family. Remember Thomas? Strong as an ox one harvest, gone by the next planting, taken by the sweating sickness that struck like lightning. Or Ilara, whose toothache festered into a swelling that stole her breath in just 2 days. A simple cut from a rusty tool, a bite from a rat, a cough that lingers too long. These are not inconveniences. They are harbingers of the grave. Your body, this vessel that must labor from dawn till dusk, your most vital, irreplaceable tool, feels alien, rebellious, weak. It has betrayed you, leaving you utterly vulnerable to forces you cannot see or understand. This intimate, constant threat of illness shapes everything. It dictates who works the fields, who barters at the market, who tends the fire. It determines if your children will see another spring. Health is not a given. It is a precarious, fleeting state, easily lost in a world where infection blooms unseen. The lack of effective medical knowledge, the sheer helplessness in the face of disease, means illness is often viewed not as a biological event, but as a cosmic one, a test of faith, divine punishment, the malice of a witch, or the work of unseen demons carried on the damp air. It breeds a fatalism that chills the bone. You try the poultices, you swallow the bitter brews, but often the outcome feels preordained, written in the stars or the will of God. This reality highlights an incredible, almost unfathomable gap between their world and ours. Our expectation of recovering from pneumonia, of surviving a broken bone, of living into old age with chronic conditions managed by pills and procedures, this is a radical departure, a historical anomaly. They lived with death not just as a distant certainty, but as a near neighbor who might knock at any moment, brought in on the breath of a sick child or the bite of a flea. It makes you appreciate the simple fact of good health, not as a right, but a profound, fragile blessing, a vulnerability they lived with, died by, every single day. Ask yourself, when sickness struck, would you rely solely on prayer and potions, or would the sheer animal fear drive you to desperate, forbidden remedies? Was it faith that sustained them through the fever, or simply the instinct to cling to life, no matter how brutal? She wraps the warm cloth soaked in comfrey around your aching stomach, her face etched with worry, not knowing if this simple act is medicine or merely a gesture against the inevitable. The bells toll in the distance, another soul lost to the silent enemy that walks among them. Your oldest child, barely taller than the plow handle, is already helping in the fields. Their small hands, calloused surprisingly early, pull weeds from stubborn soil or gather stones tossed up by the plowshare. There is no question of age being a barrier to labor here. Younger children, still small enough to be lifted easily, assist closer to the wattle and daub hut. They fetch water from the stream with tiny wooden buckets, tend to younger siblings wrapped in rags, or help with simple tasks like sorting dried beans or gathering kindling from the woodpile. Playtime is not a structured, designated period. It is stolen moments, often involving mimicking the very adult work they are already integrated into. Dirt clods become loaves of bread. Sticks become tools. Younger siblings are bundled up like babies to be cared for. There is no extended period of protected innocence. The world does not wait for them to develop or find themselves. Life is a constant, demanding presence, and childhood is a brief, flickering candle before the harsh light of adulthood. There is no formal schooling for the likes of you, huddled in your small village. Learning happens by doing, by watching your parents, your older siblings, your neighbors. You learn to read the sky for weather, the soil for its willingness to yield, the faces of people for intent. Adulthood isn't a distant milestone to be reached after years of sheltered growth. It creeps in with the capacity for work, with the first time you can carry a heavier load, with the first time a crucial task is entrusted solely to your small, capable hands. The weight of responsibility arrives long before any notion of youthful freedom departs. This era forces a stark reevaluation of our modern concept of childhood as a distinct, lengthy phase dedicated primarily to learning, exploration, and protection from adult burdens. Survival was the ultimate teacher, and it demanded that every able body contribute as soon as they could stand steady on their feet and follow instruction. While this might seem undeniably harsh through a modern lens, it also fostered a different, perhaps more brutal, kind of resilience and competence from an early age. Their children learned the fundamental, often unforgiving truths of survival directly from the ground up. The hunger that drives effort, the cold that demands shelter, the precarious balance between life and death. These were lessons many modern children are thankfully shielded from. It raises the question, would you survive this life without choice in the matter, integrated into the labor force before your teeth are fully grown? Or would you bend just enough to fit the mold carved by necessity? It wasn't a question they could afford to ask. They simply lived it. The dust rises in plumes down the track from the great house. It is the familiar, dreaded sight of the Lord's bailiff, his horse sleek and imposing, his face set in the stern mask of authority. Every eye in the village tracks his approach, a knot tightening in bellies. It is time. Time for the Lord's due. This is not a simple transaction of coin. You rarely touch coin anyway, save for the occasional market day or a pittance earned doing a stranger's work. No, the dues are woven into the very fabric of your existence, taken directly from the earth and your back. He dismounts, his boots heavy on the packed dirt. His voice, though calm, carries the weight of unchallengeable law. First, the harvest, a substantial portion of the grain you sweated over since planting season, watched over nervously through drought and rain, must now be measured out and carted to the Lord's granary. The best ears, of course. The fat chickens, the healthiest piglet from the spring litter. These too are selected by the bailiff's keen, cold eye. It feels like a betrayal of the earth itself to give away the fruits of its bounty and your toil to a man who does little but ride and command. But the dues are not merely goods. They are your very muscles, your waking hours. Before you can mend your own leaky thatch, before you can weed your own small plot, you must spend days, weeks, working on the Lord's dimension, his personal fields. You plow his soil, sow his seeds, bring in his harvest. You repair his fences, haul his wood from the forest, maintain the bridge he uses to cross the stream. These corvée duties are exhausting, unpaid, and always seem to come at the worst possible time, when your own crops are desperate for attention, or when hunger gnaws and every moment not spent foraging or working for yourself feels like a step closer to ruin. There is no negotiation, no appeal. Your calendar is dictated by his needs, your strength consumed for his benefit. You might grumble among yourselves, in the dark of the alehouse or huddled around a dying fire. Whispers of unfairness, of families struggling while the Lord feasts. But the whispers stay whispers. The memory of the last man who openly defied the bailiff or refused the call to labor is a stark and bloody lesson etched into the village's collective memory. Resistance is not merely met with punishment, it is met with eradication. Your small, fragile life, easily extinguished, serves as a chilling warning. This system, this endless rendering of dues, defines your economic reality. You are not free to move to another village where the Lord might be less demanding or the soil more fertile. You are bound to this land, tied by generations of obligation. The wealth you create with aching hands and broken nails is systematically siphoned away. It's a system based entirely on inherited status. Because your father's father was a serf on this land, you are a serf on this land. You inherit not land or wealth, but obligation. A surprising insight, perhaps, is how little cash changed hands in this economy. The real currency was labor, goods, and service, all flowing upwards to the Lord. It makes you wonder about our modern complaints about taxes. Imagine a world where not just a portion of your earnings was taken, but the very stuff you grew and the time you spent, simply because of an accident of birth centuries ago. Their lives underline a somber truth. Concepts we see as fundamental, like personal freedom, property rights, and economic mobility, are not inherent human conditions, but hard-won, fragile achievements. You exist within a cage of expectation and requirement, built by bloodline and enforced by might. Was it resignation that kept them going, or simply the knowledge that there was nowhere else to be, nothing else to do? Ask yourself, if your survival depended on it, Would you surrender the concept of freedom entirely? Dust rises from stomping feet, kicked up from the packed earth of the village square. It hangs like a hazy, golden curtain in the late afternoon sun, mingling with the faint, greasy scent of roasting meat. A scent so rare it makes your stomach ache with pleasure before you even taste it. This is not the silence of dawn or the tired murmur of evening prayers. This is sound, rough-hewn music coaxed from a battered fiddle and a drum made from stretched hide. The raucous, booming laughter of men who usually only grunt. The shrieks and giggles of children allowed to stay up past dusk. For a few precious hours, the relentless grind pauses. The calloused hands that usually grip spades or looms clap together, awkward but enthusiastic. The weary backs that bend to the harvest now straighten in clumsy dance. These are the feast days, tied to the immutable rhythm of the church calendar, or the rare blessing of a wedding or a successful birth. They arrive like unexpected gifts, islands of color in a sea of gray toil. You see old grudges momentarily forgotten as neighbors share a communal cup of ale, thin and sour by modern standards, but potent here. You watch young men and women exchange glances that would be scandalous on a normal day, sanctioned by the protective cloak of festivity. This isn't refined entertainment. It's raw, vital release. It's shaking the earth with your feet to shake the weariness from your soul. It's the communal breath taken after holding it tight for months. The generosity of the Lord, if it exists in the form of a slaughtered pig or extra barrels, feels like staggering wealth. This sporadic joy is more than mere pleasure. It's a fundamental survival mechanism. These gatherings reinforce the fragile bonds that hold the community together against famine, disease, and fear of the unknown. They remind people they are not alone in their struggle. They are psychological valves, releasing the constant pressure of a life lived on the edge of survival, where a bad harvest means hunger and a cough can mean the Black Death. There's a quiet, profound insight here, that the depth of joy can be directly proportional to the surrounding hardship. The rare moments of light feel incandescent when framed by so much darkness. While we are surrounded by endless forms of entertainment, available at any moment, ask yourself, is our joy as deep, our connections as viscerally felt, when they are not forged in the crucible of shared hardship and precious collective reprieve? They're simple, rough celebrations remind us that the human spirit, like a stubborn weed, seeks light and finds a way to bloom, even in the hardest ground. The soil is not just dirt beneath your nails. It is a living map you know by heart. You feel its texture shift from one field to the next, understanding which patch holds the water, which demands more effort from the plow. You can read the sky better than any prayer book, discerning the gray promise of rain from the heavy, sterile cloud cover. A sudden hush in the birdsong, a particular way the wind stirs the willow leaves. These are signals, warnings, or blessings. This is your education, etched not in parchment, but in the calloused palms and aching back of generations. You know the life cycle of the wheat, from seed to golden stalk, the precise moment the barley is ready for cutting. You understand the habits of the local deer, where they browse, when they might raid the tender shoots. The herbs growing wild along the hedgerows aren't just weeds, they're the village apothecary. That small, unassuming flower can stop a fever. That bitter leaf can calm a troubled stomach. This isn't abstract knowledge learned from a master. It's wisdom born of necessity, passed down through the rhythm of the seasons, whispered alongside lullabies and warnings of the hungry wolf. It is an intimate, practical understanding, rooted deep in the land you work, breathe, and die upon. Your very survival hinges on your ability to interpret and collaborate with this natural world. This profound, unwritten pact with the environment is the bedrock of medieval peasant existence. They were acutely, terrifyingly aware of their dependence on ecological systems, on the fickle weather, the unpredictable fertility of the earth, the health of the livestock, in a way that is almost alien to us now. It wasn't merely about farming for sustenance. It was a holistic understanding of their place within a grander, often unforgiving, natural order. Every frost that came too early, every drought that scorched the fields was a direct threat, a sign of the world's indifference or perhaps divine displeasure. There were prayers, yes, and rituals to appease the earth or the saints, but the true strength came from knowing how to mitigate disaster, how to coax life from stubborn ground, how to notice the first subtle signs of blight before it took the whole crop. They lived a life where nature was not a backdrop, but the main character, dictating the pace, the potential, and the perils of existence. This deep, experiential respect for the earth wasn't a philosophical choice. It was the only path to survival. It prompts a quiet question for us, isn't it? About our own often abstract relationship with the environment we live within, but rarely truly know. We have gained immense control over the symptoms of nature, diverted rivers, defied weather patterns, engineered our food, but perhaps at the cost of understanding the intricate web itself. Their grounded wisdom reminds us that true sustainability isn't just technology or policy. It comes from a deep, felt, experiential respect for the earth that sustains us. Ask yourself, have we lost the language of the land, traded wisdom for convenience, and now stand less prepared for the inevitable reckoning of nature than they were? They faced hunger and death if they misread the signs. We face consequences on a global scale if we continue to ignore them. The air inside is thick, heavy with the constant presence of wood smoke, the earthy dampness of the packed dirt floor, and the warm, pungent scent of livestock. You stir on your palate, not truly waking, but shifting against the rough weave of the straw mattress. Outside, the first thin light of dawn hasn't yet pierced the gray sky, but inside, the deepest dark has begun to recede as embers glow faintly in the central hearth. This small, low building is your entire world for half of every year, a world defined by its thick, uneven walls of wattle and daub, crudely plastered mud over woven branches, and the thick, sloping roof of thatch, home to spiders and nesting birds you rarely see but always know are there. There is only one small opening high on the wall, less a window and more a loophole, covered with a wooden shutter against the biting wind or the drumming rain. In fair weather, it lets in a grudging sliver of light, illuminating dust motes dancing in the smoky air. But mostly, your home is illuminated by the fire. The hearth is the undisputed heart of this dwelling, the glowing center around which all life orbits. It provides the scant warmth that pushes back the relentless medieval cold, casts the flickering light that makes reading, if you could read, or mending possible after dusk, and offers the only means to cook the rough grains, roots, or occasional piece of salted meat that constitutes your diet. Beside the hearth, perhaps penned slightly or simply tethered near the wall, your livestock stirs. A cow, maybe, or a few sheep, even the family pig. They share your space, their body heat contributing significantly to the warmth, especially in deep winter. They are not pets, they are walking capital. Milk, wool, meat, vital for survival. The smell is overwhelming to a modern nose, but to yours, it is simply the smell of home, the smell of life continuing. Privacy is a luxury you cannot fathom. Your entire family, sometimes extended family, sleeps within earshot of each other, alongside the animals. There is no escaping the sounds of breathing, coughing, stirring, farts. Furniture is sparse, functional, handmade with crude tools. A simple table, perhaps resting on sawhorses, heavy wooden benches to sit on, or chests, sturdy iron-bound chests where precious items are stored. A few pieces of linen, tools, perhaps a single coin or two, saved over years. Dried herbs, important documents if you are lucky enough to have any. These chests also serve as additional seating or surfaces. Everything else is kept on shelves or pegs on the walls. Every object is chosen for its utility, its ability to directly contribute to survival or basic comfort. There is no room for ornament, for personal expression in the sense we understand it. This hut is your refuge. It is the thin but vital barrier between you and the relentless forces of nature. The blizzards that can kill in hours, the floods that can sweep everything away, the constant damp that breeds illness. It is your protection from the wild animals that roam the forests at the edge of your village. Wolves with hungry eyes, bears emerging from hibernation, and just as importantly, perhaps more so in the minds of those who live here, it is a barrier against the perceived dangers of the night, the spirits that whisper in the wind, the demons that might enter through an unguarded opening, the malevolent fae who resent human intrusion. You whisper a prayer before barring the shutter, a small charm hanging above the doorframe, a protection against unseen threats as real as any wolf pack. Yet this refuge is not a fortress. Its very structure is locked in a constant, quiet battle against decay. The thatch must be patched annually, lest it rot and leak. The wattle and daub cracks and crumbles, needing regular repair against the elements. The floor is earth, impossible to keep truly clean, a breeding ground for fleas, lice, and other vermin. Rats and mice are constant companions, gnawing at stored grain, spreading disease. Living here is a constant act of maintenance, a low-level war against the natural world trying to reclaim what you have built. There is a melancholy to this, the feeling that your most fundamental possession, your home, is always on the verge of collapse, always vulnerable. This stark simplicity forces a reflection. Your home is not a place of curated comfort or individual expression. It is primarily a place of function, a shell against the world. Its form is dictated by necessity, by the scarcity of materials, by the limited tools and knowledge available. Living in such close quarters, with family and animals intertwined, fundamentally alters notions of privacy and personal space. There is nowhere to retreat, nowhere to be truly alone. It makes you look at the vast, complex dwellings of the modern age and ask, what do we truly need for shelter? Are our large, amenity-filled houses necessities, or are they products of an excess of resource and a different kind of fear? Perhaps a fear of true closeness, a need for individual silos. Their basic huts, constantly fought for and maintained, remind us that a home, at its most fundamental level, is simply a place of safety, warmth, and protection against the harsh, indifferent world outside. They built these walls, not for beauty or status, but because without them, survival itself would be impossible. And in that raw, vital function, there is a different kind of strength, a resilience born of desperate need. The last sliver of sun bleeds away beyond the edge of the world you know. Dusk doesn't linger here. It descends like a smothering blanket. The familiar shapes of trees and barns dissolve into featureless gloom. Your small hut, your village, becomes an island in a sea of absolute black. There are no distant city lights, no glowing screens, only the fading embers in your hearth, casting weak, dancing shadows that seem to twist into unsettling forms. Outside, the silence is not empty. It is filled with absence, with the potential for sounds you desperately don't want to hear. You bolt the thick wooden door, dropping the heavy bar into place with a thud that echoes in the small space. It's a flimsy barrier against the real dangers. Wolves, yes, but more terrifyingly, things that walk on two legs in the night, or things that don't have legs at all. You huddle closer to the fire, pulling a coarse woolen blanket tight around your shoulders. The air grows colder, not just from the retreating heat of the day, but from the creeping chill of apprehension. Every creak of the aging timber, every sigh of wind under the eaves is amplified, transformed by your fear into the soft scrape of claws, the whisper of something unseen just outside. This darkness is not merely the absence of light. It is the canvas upon which an entire world of belief is painted, a realm where superstition isn't a quaint folk tale, but a deeply ingrained operating system for survival. The priest speaks of demons and tempting devils, and in the pitch blackness, with only your hammering heart for company, their presence feels utterly undeniable. What else could explain the child who woke screaming, pointing at the empty corner? What else could steal the farmer's prize sow from a locked pen? What else could blight the crops overnight, leaving them black and withered? These are the works of unseen forces, and night is their dominion. Tales are whispered by the firelight, of witches meeting in the woods under the new moon, of malevolent spirits that haunt lonely crossroads, of the souls of the unbaptized wandering lost in the gloom. These aren't stories for entertainment. They are warnings, explanations, a framework for understanding the arbitrary cruelties of existence. You pray silently, instinctively, to whatever saint you feel might have sway over the things that walk in darkness. Saint Christopher, perhaps, or even Saint Michael, the vanquisher of demons. You might hang a small, blessed twig of rowan above the door, or keep a handful of salt by the hearth. These small rituals aren't about logic. They are about creating tiny islands of perceived safety in a world that feels inherently hostile once the sun goes down. It is a desperate, fundamental human need to impose some kind of order, some kind of protection, when faced with the utterly unknown and uncontrollable. The melancholy irony is that while they feared the supernatural specters, the darkness often concealed very real, very human dangers. Bandits who preyed on isolated homes, desperate souls driven to theft by hunger, or even violent neighbors under the cover of night. The fear of the invisible demon sometimes overshadowed the fear of the very visible knife, a potent reminder that in a world without effective law enforcement or widespread community safety nets, the night was simply dangerous, regardless of whether the threat was flesh and blood or spirit. This palpable fear of the dark and its potential inhabitants reflects a world where the line between the physical and the spiritual is incredibly thin. Scientific understanding is nascent or non-existent. Explanations for illness, misfortune, and death are sought in the divine or the diabolical. The darkness became a repository for all their anxieties, a tangible manifestation of the chaos that lay just beyond the fragile order of their day-to-day lives. While we might intellectually dismiss their specific fears as born of ignorance and superstition, don't we still lock our doors, check the shadows before entering our homes, and feel that ancient prickle of unease when alone in absolute darkness? Don't we have our own modern demons, the invisible spread of disease, the unseen forces controlling global economies, the abstract anxieties of a world too large to comprehend? Their darkness simply gave the timeless human fear of the unknown a different, perhaps more terrifyingly concrete form. When every rustle, every distant howl, every unexplained sound could be the approach of something truly malevolent, the night becomes not just a time for rest, but a test of nerve and faith. Ask yourself, in a world where the monsters are real, or believed to be real enough to kill you, how would your own perception of safety, of reality, be shaped? How much of your daily life would be dictated by the need to simply survive the night? The bell tolls the first Angelus before the sky is fully born. A deep, resonant sound that vibrates not just through the village stone, but in the bone. You stir on your straw pallet, the cold air biting. Beside you, your mother sighs in her sleep. It is not the clock on the wall that wakes you, for there is no clock. It is the bell, the crow of the rooster just moments before, the faint blush of gray at the window slit. Time is a presence, not a number. All day, time unfolds in moments marked by sound and light. The bell rings again at noon, the second Angelus, a signal to pause the endless weeding or the weaving, to share a meager meal. It tolls a third time at dusk, calling for the final prayer before darkness fully descends, before the world of candle and firelight takes over. These are the anchors of the day, communal moments woven into the fabric of existence, a reminder that your life is part of a larger, shared rhythm. Dictated not by man-made mechanisms, but by the divine and the natural. It's a quiet truth. You are never truly alone in time. The entire community moves with the sun and the sound of the sacred bronze. But the deeper rhythm, the one that truly governs survival, is the year. The agricultural cycle is your almanac, your clock, your fate. Spring means the thaw, the plowing of the heavy earth, prayers whispered for good weather and fertile soil. You feel the anticipation, a nervous hope after the lean emptiness of winter. Summer is the relentless, back-breaking work of tending, of praying for rain, but not too much rain, of watching the crops swell under the long sun. It's a season of desperate effort, knowing that any failure now means hunger later. Then autumn, the harvest, a frantic, joyous, exhausting race against the coming cold. Every sheaf of wheat, every gathered root is a victory against starvation. It's a time of communal effort, singing in the fields despite aching backs, fueled by the knowledge that sustenance is being secured. And finally, winter. The world slows, the earth hardens. Survival becomes about endurance, living off the stores from the harvest, huddling by the fire, praying that the supplies last until the first thaw. Life becomes smaller, confined, a test of patience and resilience. This isn't a linear progression, a climb upwards towards some distant goal. It's a circle. Spring follows winter, harvest follows planting. The bell rings Angelus today, just as it did yesterday, and will tomorrow. Life is a series of repeating patterns dictated by the turn of the sun, the needs of the earth, and the rituals of faith that attempt to soothe the anxieties of dependence on fickle nature. There is a profound, almost hypnotic predictability in these cycles, even within the ever-present struggle. You know what the year should bring, even if a blight or an early frost can shatter that expectation in an instant. It's a predictability that offers a strange form of comfort. The world might be brutal, but its fundamental turnings are reliable. This cyclical view of time stands in stark contrast to our modern obsession with the minute hand, the segmented hour, the tightly packed schedule. They lived with time, embedded in its natural flow, rather than constantly fighting against it, trying to squeeze more productivity out of every segment. Their lives were measured in sunrises, harvests, and feast days for saints, not in quarterly reports or hourly wages. It makes you pause and consider. What have we lost in gaining our precision? Are we more productive, or simply more stressed, more disconnected from the natural rhythms that once governed all human life? Their reliance on the sun, the bells, and the seasons for timekeeping suggests a different way of being present. A life lived in tune with the pulse of existence, rather than constantly racing against an artificial clock. Perhaps the quiet comfort they found in the repeating cycle is something we moderns, with all our schedules and deadlines, can barely comprehend. Was their time slower because they were less efficient, or because they were simply more present in the moments they were given? Ask yourself, in your own frantic race against the clock, do you ever stop to hear the bell, or feel the season change? Or does time simply become a tyrant on your wrist? The air smells of sweat, pine resin, and wood smoke, thick and comforting after the acrid tang of ash. Hammers ring, voices shout instructions, laughter cuts through the noise. This is the sound of the village rebuilding Thomas's barn. Yesterday, disaster. A spark, a swift, hungry fire that devoured a year's harvest store, livestock sheltering inside, and the very timbers that held it all together. Today, community. Men hoist beams, women carry water and pass bread. Children scurry underfoot, fetching misplaced tools. No contracts are signed, no wages exchanged. It is understood. Thomas's loss is a wound in the body of the village. If Thomas starves this winter, who might fall next? Your own survival, your own family's precarious hold on life, is woven inextricably with the survival of your neighbors. You lend your sturdiest axe, though you need it for your own woodpile. Your wife shares the last of her cured meat for the shared midday meal. It is a transaction older than coin, an exchange of labor, resource, and spirit born not purely of goodwill, but of cold, sharp necessity. The isolation of a single dwelling, the thought of facing the elements, the raiders, the sickness, the sheer back-breaking labor alone, that is a fear more profound than any demon lurking in the woods. You need others to raise your house, to help bring in the harvest before the rain spoils it, to sit vigil when the fever takes hold. You need them for the sheer weight of shared presence against the crushing loneliness of existence. But look closer at the faces around the fire tonight, exhausted but warmed by shared purpose. Not all the eyes hold simple kinship. That's old Elias, still grumbling about the fence Thomas's pigs broke last spring. Over there, Ilara avoids eye contact with Agnes. Everyone knows Agnes's cow got into Ilara's garden again last week. This closeness, this absolute lack of physical and social distance, is a double-edged sickle. Every argument you have with your spouse is potentially overheard. Every time you scold your child, a dozen unseen ears might judge your parenting. Your small failures, your minor indiscretions, your personal sorrows, none are truly private. The pressure to conform is as constant as the seasons. Dress as others dress. Speak as others speak. Believe as others believe. Deviate too much, and the whispers begin, corrosive and swift. The village isn't just a support network. It's a constant, informal court of judgment. Your reputation, painstakingly built over years, can be shattered by a perceived slight or a circulating rumor. This is where the petty feuds, often born of competition for scarce resources, or simply the grinding friction of constant proximity, fester and grow, sometimes for generations. A stolen chicken today might be the root of a deadly brawl at the next market fair. It's ironic, isn't it? The very people who will save your life when disaster strikes are also the people whose constant scrutiny and potential disapproval shape your life more profoundly than any lord or king. They are the mirror in which you must see yourself reflected, whether you like the image or not. The need for belonging is so primal that you will sacrifice much, privacy, individuality, even deeply held convictions, to maintain your place within the fold. It's a survival strategy, yes, but it's also a slow erosion of self, a constant bending to fit the collective shape. Ask yourself, would you thrive in this forge of shared life, bound by the rhythm of others' lives, or would the weight of all those eyes crush you? Their survival was tethered to the health of the us. To be cast out, even just informally ostracized, could be as lethal as any plague. This wasn't an abstract social contract. It was the visceral reality of needing your neighbor's hand to pull you from the mire, knowing that they, in turn, depended utterly on yours. This bond, forged in hardship and constraint, underscored a fundamental human truth, that in the face of overwhelming challenge, our deepest strength and our most complex struggles often lie within the fragile, indispensable web of us. The sun is not yet a rumor over the eastern fields, but your back already aches. You kneel beside your spouse in the dew-soaked soil, fingers cold and cracked, planting seeds side by side. There is no grand declaration here, no whispered secrets under a moonlit sky. Your union was decided years ago, a negotiation between families, a joining of two patches of earth, two sets of hands ready to labor. It was not born of burning hearts from troubadour songs, but of necessity and survival. A marriage here is a contract etched not in ink, but in shared sweat and the promise of future harvests. Your life together is not a story of finding a soulmate, but of forging a partnership vital as the air you breathe. This practicality extends to every corner of your shared existence. Your home, humble and often crowded, is the engine of your survival. The family is the essential economic unit. From the moment the first cock crows until the last ember glows in the hearth, every soul has a task. Your eldest daughter, barely taller than a churn, already knows how to separate cream from milk. Your youngest son, though he still trips over his own feet, helps gather firewood or chases chickens from the vegetable patch. Gender defines many tasks. You, the wife, manage the household, the cooking, the spinning, the care of the young and the sick, often working alongside your husband in the fields during peak season. He, the husband, focuses on the heavy plowing, the building, the protection of the land and livestock. But in moments of crisis, roles blur. Necessity is the harshest taskmaster. Children arrive not just as beloved offspring, but as future labor, as the continuation of the family name, tied to the land you hope to pass down. The grief of losing one to the fever that sweeps through the village is sharp, a wound that never fully heals. But the practical need for more hands, for an heir, remains a constant pressure, a quiet sorrow interwoven with hope. There is a deep, unspoken bond that grows from this shared struggle, a reliance, a mutual respect forged in the heat of the sun and the chill of the winter wind. It might not look like the love sung about in distant courts, but it is a profound connection, perhaps stronger for its roots in shared earth and shared burden. This model, so alien to modern notions of individual choice and emotional connection, anchored medieval society. It wasn't about finding the one, it was about finding the right partner for life's brutal dance. It makes you wonder, was the freedom to choose a spouse worth the potential instability it sometimes brings? Or was there a strange, quiet strength in this forced union? A deep knowing that came from facing down famine and plague together, bound by blood and dirt and destiny. Your family is your legacy, not just in name, but in the enduring marks your combined labor leaves upon the land, in the skills taught generation to generation, in the simple fact of enduring. Ask yourself, in a world where everything sought to break you, was this unromantic, practical partnership the very thing that held you together? It was the only life you knew. Look at your hands. Really look. They are thick, perhaps, the joints swollen, the skin a roadmap of scars and calluses. Beneath the nails, a perpetual crescent of dark earth, impossible to scrub entirely away. These hands are not merely appendages. They are your fate, your survival, the very definition of your existence. They are the tools that scratch sustenance from unforgiving ground, that twist flax into thread, that lift stones and shape timber. Every mouthful you eat, every coarse wool garment you wear, the very roof over your head, it is all built and sustained by these 10 digits, this back that aches perpetually, these shoulders that bear the weight of not just your own family, but the entire crumbling structure of society above you. Feel the worn handle of the spade, slick with sweat, its wood polished smooth by generations of identical grip. The rhythm is ancient, hypnotic. Plunge, lift, turn. Plunge, lift, turn. It is not thought that guides you now, but muscle memory, passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. The cold bite of the earth in spring, the brittle resistance of roots, the searing heat reflecting off dry soil in high summer. This physical engagement is total, immersive. There is no cushion, no screen, no abstraction between effort and result. The bread you eat tomorrow exists only because these hands broke the soil, sowed the seed, harvested the grain, ground it to flour. It is a truth as fundamental as blood, and there is a strange, quiet dignity woven into the very fabric of this relentless toil. You are part of a chain of creation, directly linked to the raw materials of existence. You build the barn, you repair the fence, you coax life from the stubborn ground. You see the result of your effort in the rising walls, the ripening field, It is a tangible contribution, a world built callus by callus. The irony, sharp as a splinter under a nail, is that while your hands build the Lord's manor, His granaries, His wealth, the vast majority of the fruits of your labor are taken. A tithe for the church, rents and services for the Lord, fines and fees for every minor infraction. You sow, others reap. It is the way of things, as unchangeable as the turning seasons. Yet the earth knows your hands. The stone knows your strength. There is a knowledge in your bone-deep weariness that the soft-handed masters will never possess. A knowledge of what is truly required to build life, not just consume it. Your sweat is the mortar of their world, and they rarely spare a thought for the hands that pour it. It forces a reflection. How much of the world we inhabit today is built on forgotten physical effort? Do we truly understand the tangible origins of our comfort? Their hands, worn smooth in some places, rough as bark in others, etched with the story of relentless work, speak a truth about value and necessity that echoes across centuries. They were not just laborers. They were the earth's translators, turning soil and seed into survival through sheer, unyielding physical will. They held the weight of their world in their palms, often receiving only crumbs in return. Was the deep physical connection to creation compensation enough for a life lived on the edge of scarcity, building wealth for others? Or was the quiet knowledge held within those calloused hands a form of wealth no lord could ever truly seize? They built the world we know, one back-breaking day at a time, with nothing but their bodies and a grim, enduring strength. You stand at the edge of the field as dusk falls, the air cooling, settling the sounds of the village into a quiet hum. You are tired, profoundly tired, the ache deep in your bones a familiar companion after another day bound to the earth. You look at the freshly turned soil, black and rich, promising life, yet demanding endless, back-breaking effort. You survived this day, navigated its countless small challenges, its constant, wearing pressures. You worked the land as your parents and grandparents did before you, bound to its rhythms, its occasional mercies, and its frequent, brutal cruelties. Your life has been circumscribed by hunger and harvest, faith and fear, community and obligation, lines drawn starkly by the necessity of simply staying alive. Was it a good life? By modern standards of comfort, freedom from want, and boundless opportunity, perhaps not. It was a life defined by constant vulnerability, limited horizons measured by the distance you could walk, and relentless physical demand that wore down the body years before its time. Yet, it was also a life woven tightly with the fabric of community, deeply connected to the natural world in ways we can barely comprehend, and grounded in the fundamental, undeniable purpose: survival, continuation, unwavering faith in a higher power and the next spring. They faced threats we can barely imagine now: famine that could silence entire families, diseases for which there was no cure but prayer or desperate ritual, the arbitrary power of lords that could crush a life on a whim, the ever-present shadow of death lurking in the shadows or walking openly in a fever. They feared the devil's breath in the dark woods beyond the village bounds, believed in curses whispered by jealous neighbors and blessings granted by distant saints with equal fervent conviction, and measured time not by clocks but by the sun's passage and the church bell's solemn toll. But they also found deep, simple joy in a shared meal after a long day, solace in bowing their heads together in prayer, strength in helping a neighbor raise a barn or tend a sick child, quiet pride in a successful harvest gathered in the barn, and radiant hope in the birth of a child, a tiny new link in the chain of generations. They endured. They planted seeds year after weary year, generation after generation, despite the overwhelming odds, the stark reality of their place in the harsh order of the world, the knowledge that hunger was often just a bad season away. Ask yourself, have we truly evolved from their core struggles? Or have we simply exchanged their tangible, immediate fears, the wolf at the door, the plague in the air, the empty granary, for our own intangible, creeping anxieties, economic insecurity, existential dread, the overwhelming noise and disconnection of the modern world? We live longer, yes, far more comfortably with vast knowledge at our fingertips, able to speak across oceans. But do we possess their resilience, forged in the crucible of daily hardship? Do we have their deep, fundamental connection to the source of their sustenance, the ground beneath their feet? Do we understand on a visceral level their profound life or death reliance on one another, on the strength found only in community? They lived lives stripped bare of modern distractions, facing the fundamental questions of existence head-on every single day. They were vulnerable, ignorant by our standards, often terribly afraid. But they were also deeply, undeniably human, finding meaning and forging essential connections in the face of overwhelming adversity. The soil they worked still holds the echoes of their lives, their fears, and their enduring, stubborn, heartbreaking hope. They feared the devil's breath, but still they planted in hope. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, built the world we now take for granted.